This evening, we'd like to welcome Angus Meekins to our meeting. This is in a series of interviews that we've had with members, longstanding members of the community. Welcome, Angus. We appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
And we'll just let you get on with it, share your life with
Ramble
us.
right on down.
Right on.
Okay, my full name is Angus Dewey Meekins. Why the Dewey? I went back in, well, my nephew went back into the computers and found out 3 generations down back that on my mother's side, there was one of her relatives in her family. His name was George Dewey Miller. And there's where I got the name of Dewey. But my name Angus, my mother had always told me that Angus was one of her brothers and that both Angus and Dewey got killed in World War I. But we couldn't find nothing pertaining to that. So I'm just maintaining Angus Dewey Meekins and hoping that the Black Angus people will send me some money for using my name.
Sure they will.
Anyway, my date of birth is 5/31/29. I was born on a Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I came into this world, and I've lived a good life ever since. Place and birth of my parents, my father was actually born in Woodlawn, but they said Baltimore. And he was born in, let me see here, he was born in June the 4th of 1891. My father was born, and he passed away in August the 10th of 74. And my mother, she was born up around White Post, Virginia, back in that area somewhere. There must have been some Cherokee Indians up there because somehow the Indians got mixed in with the Miller family. But anyway, she was born on September the 1st of 1894, and she passed away of November 1995. And their grandparents. So anyway, my father and mother, I guess after they were first married, they went to work in the cotton mill at what was known as Alberton. Mm-hmm. They worked in that cotton mill, I don't know how long. I know my sister kept us, my 2 brothers, myself, and they worked in the cotton mill. They would walk down Wrights Mill Road through what they called the cut, where the Katzen store was there on Wrights Mill Road, and they went down, followed the stream down to the railroad track, and then walked down the railroad track, crossed the trestle, and over to the mill, and that's how they traveled back and forth to get to work, and also after I guess they left the mill, and then my father went in as a plaster. He plastered then the rest of his time. And my mother then, she was the housekeeper at that time, from then on. So that was my on my mother's side. And then it gets down to my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather's name was Andrew, no, wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Take your time.
That's all right. Oh, okay. My great-grandfather's name was David J. Meekins. And he was born in April 1866. He died 1894. And my great-grandmother on my father's side, her name was Mary Cornthwaite, was her last name. And from what I can gather, she was a pistol. I mean, she was something else. But anyway, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was a furniture maker. He made furniture. In fact, I have a rocking chair that he made over in my house that he made out of chestnut oak lumber. And he done everything by hand, and that chair does not have a nail, screw, or nothing in it. He put everything together with pegs. And it has a cane seat in it, and I treasure that thing. You know, and of course I guess my grandmother, her name was Mary Bailey, and let's see, grandmother. Yeah, her name was Mary. I'll get his figure in a minute. Yeah. anyway, where was we at? I've lost
She was
track.
born.
Pardon?
Your grandparents, you're on your dad's.
Yeah, my grandma, okay, her name was Minnie. Her name was Minnie, and I don't have her last name, but she was born January 1869, and she was born in Virginia, and she died in December 1942. So, that was on my mother's side. And on my father's side, did I give you them? David J. Meekins?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting confused with this. So, bear with me, because,
Would you want us to ask the questions?
no, I can do it. I said I can do it, and I'll do it. Okay, how many brothers and sisters? Where did I go to school? I went to school at Quaker Hill to the 4th grade. Then I left Quaker Hill and went to Randallstown. And I went to the 6th grade in Randallstown School, and after the 6th grade, I quit school. Now, I remember the truant officer coming to the house and talked to my mother, and of course, all the other siblings had already gone to work, whatever, but I was the only one left home. So the truant officer came there, and she said, Miss Meekins says, don't he want to go to school? My mother says, no. So she looked at me and said, don't you want to go to school? And of course, being a kid, I thought, man, if I don't have to go to school, I can play and do what I want to do. So I quit. I quit school in the 6th grade. But I have self-educated myself to the point where I consider myself as a high school graduate. Now, to tell you why. When I went to work at Social Security, I got in with educated people. And I worked with them. And after 3 years at Social Security, I was made supervisor of the painting department of that whole Social Security complex down there. They let me sit down and figure up the square footage of painting and everything for that whole complex. What a job that was, and I did it with a 6th grade education. Before I left Social Security, I was also supervisor of the carpenter shop, which took care of all the carpenter work and all in Social Security. So I benefited by going to Social Security and getting an education there. And I figured that I can do just about anything that any high school graduate can do. So I'm pretty proud of myself along those lines.
Rightly so.
Yeah. You can see what I've done here, all that work there I've done. Okay,
Brothers and sisters.
yeah. I have 2 brothers and a sister. My sister, Evelyn, she was born in 4/4/21. Brother Robert was born in 12/22/22, and brother Jack 12/5/24. They were born, and then their spouses, number of children. My brother Jack had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Robert had 2 boys, and Evelyn had a boy and a girl. Now, Evelyn is deceased. I don't have the date that she passed away, but she's deceased. And it says, did you have chores to do as a boy, and what were they? At home, I took care of just about everything. As far as, we had a little 15-acre farm down on Dogwood Road, Dogwood and Wrights Mill Road, and I took care of taking care of the cow. We had a cow and a horse and chickens and hogs, the whole works, and I took care of all of that. And also, I would be in with my mother. She taught me how to cook, and her and I would do the work in the house in the morning. We'd go out and plow the ground in the afternoon, and that was my chores at home. So up until I was 16 years old, and then that's when World War II was going on. I was too young to go fight, but I went in a war plant, and I worked in a war plant until the war was over, and then I went into plastering, and I plastered for quite a while. Then I got a job here in Granite carrying mail in 1962, worked at that for 17 months, went back to plastering. After that, I got a job at Social Security, spent almost 28 years at Social Security, retired in 1990, and been retired ever since. So that took care of and now I'm working for Betty now, which is a good job. Okay, and now you wanna know about my spouse.
Yes, Betty.
What can I say about my spouse? Well,
Well, you
Betty,
can say anything because we're going to record it.
okay. Betty, I'll tell the whole story. Betty's the love of my life. We met when probably she was 5 years old and I was 6. Because I'll tell you why, her parents lived on the farm where the sawmill is, and worked for Dr. Bell, and of course they became friends of my family. So they would come on Sundays, they would come visit. Well, when they come visit, they brought Betty and they brought Junior, the two children they had at the time, and that's when I met Betty, from there. So after that, time went on, and then they moved up on Davis Avenue and got that farm up there, which was a big dairy, I think it was 600 and some acre dairy farm there. And of course, I got to know Betty very well then. I'd ride my bicycle from Dogwood Road up to see her, and then I'd ride back home at night after dark, but I didn't bother about the scaring part of it. I'd beat it on down the road until after I got old enough, and then I got my car. But when Betty would be milking the cows, I'd go in the barn and help her milk the cows and help carry the milk out. Well, Pappy would come in and he said, "Now you boys got to get out of the barn. You can't be in there while we're milking." I'd say, "Well, okay, Pappy," and I'd go out and go down this door and come around and I'd go back in the back other door. I'd be back in there again. But that was that part of it. And Betty's occupation, she was a key punch. She got written down here, key punch, and then she managed the Granite Mobile Home Park for 27 years. She managed that. And we were married at Mount Olive Church in September the 10th, 1948. Number of children, we had 3 boys and a girl. Stephen, Denny, Keith, and Sherry. Stephen was born 4/23/52. Dennis 2/23/54. Keith was born January 19th, 59, and Sherry Lynn 3/27/63. And tragically, we lost our
Well, why don't we just move
no,
on?
that's all right. We lost him in June the 7th of 2011, and that was
It's never easy.
no. Grandchildren, we had, see, Dennis has got 2, Steve's got none, and we got grand dog, we got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 grand dogs, you know,
Yes.
and so we got a pretty good family, but and we got a life loss as mother, father, spouse, children. My parents are gone. My sister's gone, and I lost my son. And they said, what was their trade?
What was your trade? You've covered pretty much of that.
Yeah. Okay, what was your occupation? All right, that place where you were married, I got that covered too, didn't I?
No, I don't
Yeah.
think did you mention?
Yeah, I mentioned the Mount
Oh,
Olive.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, well, I built my home, not my first
Okay.
home. Forgive me for getting hit.
Just words.
You know, anyway. Who did you purchase your home from? I didn't purchase it, I built it. Betty and I built it. My father-in-law had all that 600 and some acres over there, and I went to him one day and I said, "Pappy, I want to build a house." He said, "Where do you want to build it?" I said, "Out there." "Well, go ahead and build it." So her and I built it. I laid the block, she mixed the mortar and carried the cement to me, her and I built it. And it took us a little over a year to build that house. Back in 1950, I think around 1952 we built that house. And then we turned around and sold it in 2002, got rid of it. So that took care of the house, and you know, let's see, I covered, the occupation part, the house, okay, the quarries down here. I don't remember too much about those quarries, about the quarry, the big one over here. I do remember, when I guess I was about, probably about 8 years old, when my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, Carl Hawk, him and I used to walk down the old, what we called the dinky track, that run from Davis Avenue on down to the Patapsco River. And at that time, the railroad tracks were still there, what the train run on, and the trestle was still across the river. It hadn't been washed out. But I do remember the station where the train would park over here off of where Miss McComas lived. Jim, what was that? Melrose Avenue. That had a little station there where the train. Now, somebody said, I don't know how true it is, that train is still in the bottom of that quarry. I don't know whether it is or not, but it was said that it was, and that when the train brought the stone out of the quarry, they had a track came up around the wall and but that's basically all that I know about that. And that would have been, let's see, about, I was born 29 and 8 to 9, I've been about 1937, somewhere along in there.
What about those quarries and the mining they were doing when we went back here and took a trip that day behind your place?
Those are feldspar.
Okay.
They were dug in there way before my time, but that feldspar, that was a kind of a gold-colored stone. I understand that they used that for pottery. I don't know for sure, but on the little place that we had down on Dogwood Road, and I wanted to take the guys down there that day and the ladies, but we didn't have time. But on the place that we had, our little farm, there was a couple of big holes where they dug that feldspar out. And all, and of course there's nothing, there, but, and one thing we did have back on our farm, we had a still back there, that in fact, some of the parts are still there, the spring and all, where they made white lightning back in there.
It's important.
But anyway, that was back on our farm. Okay. The airplane crash. The day that airplane crashed, I had left Social Security and was on my way home, and I stopped at the Sinclair station at Rolling Road and Windsor Mill, got gas, pulled out of there, started up Windsor Mill Road, and the Brantley boy down here was thumbing. I picked him up, and when I picked him up, I happened to look outside of my window, and I seen this object coming down, falling, over and over. And what that was one of the guys out of the airplane that when they hit, I seen them when they took off at the airport down there.
Rutherford, yeah.
And they were up and they were practicing blindfold flying, like night flying. And what they did, they come and one plane hit the other one just like this and cut the top off each one of them. Well, both planes come down and both people fell out of, the pilots fell out of both airplanes. The one man, when he came down, he hit on the edge of Davis Wrights Mill Road, hit the bank, went down, and he dug a trench with his body down the bank, and his head, when his head hit, it just looked like somebody busted a coconut all over everything. And of course, the airplane was down in the water there, and they didn't know that there was a second plane that had crashed until Gilbert Shiflett lived down on Wrights Mill Road. He was up in the woods looking around, and he found the other airplane. Well, the man that fell out of that, when he hit the ground, he hit it so hard that it almost buried him down in the leaves and grass up in the woods. So there was two planes, and that's what happened there, how that took place. But they were trainers. They were training these guys how to fly. Of course, they didn't get too much training out after that.
When was that, do you remember?
Let's see, I went to work at Social Security in 1963, and that probably would have been in the early 70s maybe.
Yeah, I remember something
Yeah.
67 sticks in my mind.
Yeah, well, see, it could have been.
It was a newspaper
in
article.
between there, yeah, because it was not too long after I was at Social Security that happened.
Were they out of Rutherford area?
I believe so.
And how long have I been a member of the Granite Presbyterian Church? Well, when Betty and I got married in 1948, I was a member of the Mount Olive Church. And of course, when I married Betty, I came to Granite Presbyterian Church. But I think my membership started, Jim should know better than I do, I think it was around 1952 that I started as a member of this Granite Presbyterian Church. And I've been a member ever since, except for a little bit that I went down to the Assembly of God Church down here where the Chinese go to church now. I went down there. And I've served on some of the officers and part. I was ordained a deacon in 1/31/1960, ordained as an elder in 1/24/1965, and elected a trustee in 1970. And it says, were you a teacher in the Sunday school? No, I never taught Sunday school. And what committee of the church have you served on? I've served on quite a few, but mainly my serving in this church was in the culinary field. I worked in the kitchen with the women and all, and we took care of the church. I never served in the military. The only part I'd done during World War II was worked in the war plant, making stuff for them to fight with.
Where was the war plant?
At Halethorpe, Revere Copper and Brass plant over in Halethorpe. We made all aluminum products, pontoon bridge parts and rocket launcher parts and all kind of, a lot of extruding aluminum and everything. My whole family, my brother, my father, and a bunch of us worked there all through the whole war. But as soon as the war was over, we got fired and went back to plastering. But that was that part of it. Do you recall the first car? Yes. First car I had was a Model A Ford. Had a rumble seat, the whole works. And Betty and I rode in that little Model A Ford, and we've done all kinds of things with that Model A Ford. We hill climbed, anything that you could do honorary, we done it with that. we would get Will worked on the farm. He always wanted to go to the store, and I'd put him in the back of the rumble seat, take him over to the store, and he'd get everything he wanted. Then I'd scare him to death coming home. I hope I'm not getting out of line here.
We'll get you back.
But you might have to do a little editing. Okay. Okay, I took care of it. Well, my second car was a 1941 Chevrolet. That's what we went on a honeymoon with down in Natural Bridge, Virginia. Okay, who was the president of the United States? Well, President Roosevelt was my man. He done a lot for the country and everything. And I think I'd have to say that he was the one for me. And I said, what do you foresee in the future of Granite as a community? I don't see Granite moving too fast. I think we haven't moved too fast as up to this far, and I think Granite will pretty much stay the way it is because of the way the land is situated, and so much of the land, some of the land belongs to the state and to the Catholic Church, and all. I think we'll pretty much stay where we're at in Granite.
What do you think was the most memorable event that occurred in Granite?
The most memorable event that we had was I guess probably when we celebrated, what year was that, Jim, the anniversary of our church?
95.
1995. We had a parade here, and my father-in-law had his horses, and we had a parade here in Granite. That was about the most memorable one, other than the fire that we had when our barn burnt down. That was a very memorable event that night. But I guess that would pretty much take care of that end of it.
Okay, well, we could open it up to some questions if anybody has any questions now.
Can I make a comment?
She certainly may.
Angus said he cooked with the women. The women cooked with Angus. And he made the best hush puppies and homemade bread, fried chicken, and I can remember roasted duck at Christmas time.
I can go into this.
Sure.
When I came into the church, naturally, I had a lot of experience in cooking with my mother. And so as soon as I got in here, then I got in with the Women's Association and started in with the suppers and all. And at the time when we started, we would always have an oyster and ham supper in the fall and a chicken and ham supper in the spring. Well, Don Flower's father would fry the oysters for us in the fall, and I would get in there and help him. Mary Dorsey would fry the chicken in the spring, and I'd get in with her. So then, when they both retired from it, then I took over that end of it, both chicken and the oysters, and then I became an honorary member of the Women's Association of Granite Presbyterian Church, and I did most of the planning for them at the end. I did most of the buying, and I also seen that everything was taken care of in the kitchen when it was cooking. We done all the cooking and everything, and we served some big suppers. We would serve the JCs, I think we served about 5 different organizations out there in Randallstown Community Hall up top, and all of us we'd really work, and we'd done some big suppers, but I was always the one in the front, seeing that everything was done and done, like it should be. And we worked, but I used to have fun with Miss McComas and Mary Albright, because both of them wanted to be boss, and they'd get into it, and I'd have to get in between them and say, now girls, we ain't getting nothing done with you girls fussing. Now you gotta stop fussing and let's get it done. So that was the way we worked it, but that's how I got my name as chief chef. That's on here. But I was the chief chef here for all those years, and still do some cooking, but not that much, not more. So, anyway.
Anybody, go ahead.
Do you remember the jousting tournaments?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
talk about them a little bit?
They had that down here in Mr. Bremen Trail's field, right there at Granite Road and Old Court. And they would have the arches set up and all, and we'd go up there, and of course they had riders, and they would get up on their horse, and they had their lance, and of course they'd ride through and take the off. And Mr. Bremen Trail, he would always be the knight, or the one that called for him, and he'd say, "Charge, Sir Knight." He'd take off with his horse, with his thing up, and he'd catch, and that's the way this thing went the whole time, but that's what it was all about, and that was every year down there, quite a thing, that jousting tournament, right there in that bottom.
Which side of Old Court Road going this way?
Well, it'd be on the left-hand side.
That's what I
going
thought,
out.
okay. Somebody told me there was.
Just
a light.
after you pass, Granite Road, the stone piers might still be there where they went in the entrance. Well, if you would went in that entrance, it would be directly off the left of that entrance that went in there, because Bremen Trail's place was on back up in there, and the field where they done the
Jousting.
jousting was down there right in that bottom area. Yeah, that was quite a thing back then. Yeah.
When did that end?
Now,
Around what year?
that I'm not sure. I couldn't say.
It went along to the 50s, about
Early
53, I think.
50s. I still have one of the rings. They started riding with the big ring that they'd hang up. And the rider would stand up in the stirrups full gallop when the band struck the tune.
Mm-hmm.
And you went through and you picked off the big ring, and then they'd come around again, and you get a smaller ring, and then you get a smaller ring. And, the Kiwanis band played the music. My cousin Bob Moore played in that. He played trombone.
Do you have any pictures? Either of you have any pictures
No,
of any of the events? No.
Was this just a granite thing or a?
No, it was.
No, it was put on, sponsored by the Odd Fellows.
Right.
The Odd Fellows, at the same time, when it goes back, started out just strictly as a fundraiser, and for the Oddfellows, and then they ended up having a queen of the Oddfellows. And you got to vote for a girl or a woman to be queen. And then she was crowned on the field, and then they would all come back here for the dinner at the Oddfellows Hall.
I think the last year Charles Brady won, and I don't remember who the queen was. I was little.
Yeah,
So was
well,
I.
Young.
I used to, my father wouldn't let me go. So with a fellow by the name of Richard Gagnon, we would go anyway. And I think admission was 25 cents. I mean, it was next to nothing. And you could buy Coke for a nickel.
In the younger days, Uncle Buck rode, Charlie Dell, he rode.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't wear armor, did they? I mean, they just wore, did they wear costumes though?
Just a riding gear,
I mean, they didn't wear, just,
No, there was no.
just comfortable clothes?
One of the things that I always remember is the Schmidt girls. There were two Schmidt girls.
Sam
And-
Smith one too.
Yeah, and they would always be a winner. Those girls could ride like crazy, and they were young women
Yeah.
when I met them.
Well, they'd be the first ones to ride through. They'd lead the procession.
Yeah,
I don't
like that.
know that they ever rode with a lance.
I have no idea, I don't know, but I know that they were high stepping.
Yeah, yeah.
Their horses would do all kinds of little.
You know, it was the Maryland sport, so it wasn't just the Oddfellows, it was, Deer Park, Dutch Picnic. They had a tournament every year, and it was a big thing.
Even St. Alphonsus Church tried to imitate that in their lower bottom
Oh,
The river.
by the river, and it wasn't near as successful as the one up here. They weren't as well organized. But that was during, the brothers would really be the ones that was putting that on amongst themselves. But I can remember that, and that was just, get on your horse and don't break your neck.
there's still a little bit of it though.
Yes, in fact, there's a place near Annapolis that holds jousting tournaments all the time.
Crownsville.
On General South,
Down in Crownsville where they have.
Crownsville, there you go.
right off the General South.
So if you want to see the sport, as a play active, that's the place to go.
Isn't it the state sport, jousting?
Yes, yes. I really don't
Do you
know
have-
why though.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so.
You sure? Mrs. Meekins, do you have anything you want to add?
There's a lot you could add.
Let me give me a minute here. Angus mentioned about us building our home. And we did. I even got up on the roof and nailed the shingles and things like that. Of course, with me, I was the oldest of 9 children, and I more was like a boy. I had a brother next to me, but the girl, I did a lot of men's work. I went out in the field, husked corn and shucked wheat, drove the tractor and all that kind of thing. And